Hello, my name is Dan Skip Allen, and this is the Top 5 Weekly, where myself and a friend, in this case, two friends, get to talk about a topic based on what movies are out in theaters today. Um, and the topic is a tough topic. We could have chose a lot of topics for this movie, but we decided we're going to do drug addiction films, and there's a good handful of drug addiction films. But it's a special episode for me because I got two friends who I've been meaning to get on one of my shows for a while now, and I finally got them on here. And it's my good buddies Camden and Sean from the website that I work for, disappointmentmedia.com, the editor in chief, Mr. Sean Boelman. How are you doing, Sean?
Doing well. How are you, Dan?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to have you on finally on one of my shows.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're such a busy guy. I know it's hard to get you locked down to doing something. And Camden, who's been on before the Top 5 Weekly, but not with me and Sean together like this. So this is kind of a reunion of the crew here.
Yeah.
How are you doing, Camden?
I'm doing all right, thank you.
Yeah. So what do you guys, starting with Sean, what do you think about this topic? I mean, that we decided to do as a topic?
Yeah, I think that this is a topic that's kind of personal to me because I have a lot of family members who have dealt with addiction in the past. And so it's a topic that really resonates with me in a lot of films. There are a lot of films that are hard to watch that have addiction-related topics, but they're rewarding. But I also tried to come up with some unorthodox picks, and I think you'll be interested to see some of the ones I chose.
Well, that's one of the things that's great about the show is that if the guests pick movies that maybe people may not have heard of or haven't seen, and then that'll shed some light on films, and then they go out and watch those films. And that's one of the great things about the Top 5 Weekly. Camden, what do you think about the topic? And do you have any comments as far as that goes?
Well, personally, I don't have a lot of experience with drug addiction, or I'm not familiar with people who have had this problem, but I think that's why it's important for movies to discuss this. That way people like me who have no experience with it learn to empathize and learn more about the issue, because it's a very important issue that affects a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I've seen it so much in movies, but it hasn't been something that has affected me. Now, alcohol addiction is another thing. That's a whole nother ball of wax with my family, but we're not talking about that right now. We're just talking about drug addiction. So let's get into this. You guys are the guests. You guys get to go first. And as always, the rules are if somebody has something at like 5 or 4 or whatever, and somebody else has it at 1 or 2 or whatever, we just wait till we get to that 1 or 2 to talk about it. So we just kind of skip over that person until we get to that. So we have a larger discussion later on in the episode. So Sean, let's get this started. What is your number 5?
So my number 5 is probably one that neither of you have seen, I bet. It's a cult film, actually. It's not what you would normally think of when you would come up with a list about top films about drug addiction, because it's not a very good film. But in the discussion of films about drug addiction, it's kind of important to bring this up, and it is Tell Your Children, better known as Reefer Madness.
Say that again.
It is called Tell Your Children, or better known as Reefer Madness.
Oh, yeah, I have heard about this.
It is a propaganda film from the 1930s. It was financed by a church group, and it is about the dangers of marijuana.
Oh, okay.
It's a little bit ridiculous, honestly, in its portrayal of drug addiction, but I think it is an interesting starting point, especially when talking about the depiction of drugs in to talk about the type of thing that, even though it is an excessive and propagandized version of this story, that it's one of the first films to deal with the topic. And while we have evolved in the way we portray it, this is kind of the film that's opened the door for all of the films that come since.
Yeah, I have heard about Reefer Madness. Yeah. Camden, have you heard about Reefer Madness?
I have not, actually.
Okay, yeah. In film circles that I've been around, because I've been around a lot of different film circles, I have kind of like heard whisperings of this film, Reefer Madness. But good choice, Sean. Let's go to Camden. Camden, what is your number 5?
Okay, so my number 5 is a very recent movie. You all probably seen it, Her Smell with Elizabeth Moss.
Yeah, I have seen that. I don't have that on my list. Sean, you don't have that on your list, do you?
No, I don't have that on my list.
Okay, good
All right.
one. Camden, go ahead.
So Her Smell is about, this Elizabeth Moss playing this, punk rocker in this girl band, and it's told in 5 episodes in real time, taking over different parts of her career, and it's about a woman struggling with addiction, trying to recapture her creative inspiration for her band in different periods of her life. And I think the reason why it's just such a great movie is because Elizabeth Moss is a really captivating performer, and it's a very manic performance that is very anxiety-inducing, especially considering she is a mother in this movie and she has a daughter that she's responsible for. So whenever it comes to a parent who is addicted to drugs and alcohol, it's a very scary experience. And Elizabeth Moss does a really great job of playing all the highs and lows of addiction as well as the road to recovery.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Camden. When this came out, I saw it. I actually had a double feature of this and something else the same night. And I saw this as part of the Florida Film Festival, I believe, or I was in the midst of the Florida Film Festival and I saw a screening of this or whatever. And when I walked out, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. But the one thing that did resonate with me was the drug addiction aspect of it. It really showed the effects of drug addiction on her as a character. That's something it did resonate with me. Sean, do you remember this film?
Yeah, I thought it was a really magnificent film. I thought that the music elements were what really resonated with me because I thought that was the more prominent nature of it, were the mutants and the parent elements. But I do agree that the drug addiction part of it is very well done. And I think that, as Camden said, that it owes a lot of it to Elizabeth Moss' performance. And she's absolutely exceptional in the film, as is the rest of the cast. I'm sure both of you know that I'm a huge fan of Dan Stevens, and I thought his performance in the film was pretty amazing as well.
Yeah, Dan Stevens is great. I loved him, and ever since I saw him in Downton Abbey. That's another thing. All right, so that's Camden's number 5. My number 5 is the film. It's the first film of 2. It actually has a sequel, and it is just a wild, crazy film, and it really showed the nature of the film. Really shows you that the drug addiction part of it, where these guys are in the house and they're wild, and then they're just doing all this crazy stuff. Maybe one of you guys have this on your list. I don't know, probably. Does anybody have Trainspotting on their list?
I do have Trainspotting on my list.
So do I.
All right, so we will hold off when we get to Trainspotting on you guys' list. Then we'll discuss it. That's why I mentioned it right away. I didn't want to get into the plot or nothing. So we'll skip me, and we will go back to Sean with your number 4.
Yeah, so my number 4 is also a kind of unorthodox pick in that it's not one that one would immediately think of as a negative portrayal of drug addiction. But I think that in reality, it is a very negative portrayal of drug addiction. And that is the 2019 film, The Beach Bum.
Oh, yeah.
Matthew McConaughey. And I think the reason why it is, first of all, does anyone have that?
No, but oh god, I love that film.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant film. I think that Harmony Korine did a great job with it. It's a deconstruction of the stoner genre. And normally the stoner genre is kind of glorifying drug use. And in this case, it's kind of like a cousin of Tell Your Children in a way. And that whereas Tell Your Children is a very more straightforward, like drugs are bad, this is kind of showing the impacts that it has on a person, and that it's not inherently terrible, but the effects that it has are. And so it's that overuse that makes it such a heartbreaking thing. And I think it's both a hilarious film because there are a lot of very funny moments in it, but then there's that really somber undercurrent in the film that I think is what makes it really stand out.
Yeah, there's so many comedic moments in this film, and you have characters like Martin Lawrence and Snoop Dogg and people like that are in there, and you're like, okay, this is like this party life, but it's also a life about a guy that's really doesn't have a life, and
Right.
the smoking and this world has absorbed his life. And he really doesn't have much of a life outside of doing this, and it kind of has ruined his life in a way. Camden, do you remember The Beach Bum? Have you seen it?
Oh yeah, I've seen it multiple times. Love the movie. It's hilarious. I love Matthew McConaughey in it. And I think what Sean was saying was stoner genre is known for glorifying drug use, whereas this one doesn't. And the first time I saw it was with Sean in theaters, and there were a lot of people in the theater with us who were just, visibly uncomfortable and like cringing at it, because the movie does a good job of not showing his drug use as a positive thing, but as something that's actually quite embarrassing at times. And I think the fact that the audience was really cringing at it was what made it so effective.
Yeah. It definitely had some cringeworthy moments, but there was some laughs in there too. So they didn't make it too serious, because Matthew McConaughey was playing off on his persona a little bit, to the fact that, that he was playing this character of the Beach Bum. It wasn't exactly Matthew McConaughey, but he was kind of playing off himself a little bit. All right, so that was Sean's number 4. Let's go to Camden's number 4.
Okay, my number 4 is Rachel Getting Married.
I don't have that on my list. Sean, you don't have that either? Okay. Go ahead, Camden.
Right. Well, Rachel Getting Married is probably Jonathan Demme. Is that his name? Demme or Demi?
Demi.
It's probably Jonathan Demme's best movie, in my opinion, even better than Silence of the Lambs. And most of it is because
words.
Yeah, strong words. But it's about Anne Hathaway, who plays a woman who's in and out of rehab, coming home for her sister's wedding. And it's a dialogue-heavy movie, and more than anything, it explores the after effects of drug addiction and abuse on the family unit. So watching Anne Hathaway struggle to, have a normal relationship with their family is really powerful. It's tackles, the dynamics of addiction and how her sister feels like all these tensions on her, addicted sister and not on herself for her own wedding. And it really is a family drama that is equal parts uncomfortable but emotional, because it shows just how damaging drug addiction is on you and the people around you.
Yeah. When this came out, I absolutely loved it. I was like, oh my God, finally Anne Hathaway in a movie that I could get behind, instead of these kind of hoity-toity, kind of soft little fluffy little things that she was doing. She finally did something that really resonated, that was like, okay, here we go. Here's the real Anne Hathaway. You know what I mean? Something that she could get nominated for an Academy Award for, some awards for, and something serious. And that is basically what it is. It's, you have that one person in the family that everybody's like the black sheep of the family, and that everybody's embarrassed about because of various whatever problems. And in this case, it is drug addiction. And yeah, great film. Sean, do you remember this film?
It's been many years since I've seen it. Like, it's been since it came out, basically. So I don't remember a lot about it, just because of the amount of times I watch each year. But I do remember being absolutely blown away by Anne Hathaway's performance. I think it's one of the best of her career, minus maybe Les Miserables, which I would say is her best, but she's excellent in this film. Yeah.
All right. So that was Camden's number 4. Here's my number 4. Might be another one that you guys have on your list. I don't know. I mean, it's a film. All I'm going to say is I believe it's from Darren Aronofsky. Does anybody have a?
Yeah.
I do not.
But you do, Camden. You have
I do.
For a Dream on your list.
Yeah, it's high up on my list.
All right, so we'll skip me once again, and we'll go back. That's fine. This is what the show is. So we don't want to have multiple conversations about the same thing. So we'll skip me again, and that's my middle name, Skip, Dan Skip Allen. So skipping me. That's fine. Plus, you guys have mentioned some great films already, so it's fantastic having the discussions we've already had with the films you guys have already mentioned. So we're going back to Sean with his number 3.
Yeah, my number 3, I'm pretty sure, is on neither of yours because I believe that both of you did not like this. I know that Dan absolutely hated it. It is The Souvenir, directed by Joanna Hogg.
Yeah, not a fan of that movie.
Yeah, it's one that actually Camden reminded me of today that I forgot about, but I absolutely adore it. I think it's a brilliant film, and I think it's one of the films that has left me the most shaken. Partially because I did identify so much with the character, the protagonist, dealing with a loved one who is suffering from drug addiction. And that is something that I've been through, not in the same situation, not with like a romantic partner, but with somebody who is a loved one dealing with addiction. I think it is a very, very difficult film to watch, but it is rewarding in that it explores it in a very nuanced and empathetic way.
Yeah, that aspect of it was one of the better parts that I did enjoy. The because you're saying, why are you doing this to her? Why you keep doing this to her? You know, she loves you, she cares about you, and that you keep doing this, and you're like, dude, man, stop it. When I'm watching the movie,
and I think Tom Burke's performance in that film is also amazing. I think that Tom Burke is one of the most underrated actors working today. He also had a supporting role in Mank as Orson Welles, and I thought he was one of the MVPs of that film, but he's getting like no recognition for it, which is sad. I think Charles Dance, who's getting the more recognition in that film, is also good, but Tom Burke is just this phenomenal actor, and he brings a ton of emotion to the role that really makes the film resonate.
Yeah. Do you remember seeing The Souvenir, Camden?
Yeah. It was a movie that I first watched and I liked and respected, but it's one of those things that I just probably couldn't watch again. It was a very, very slow movie, but like Sean said, Tom Burke is fantastic in that movie, and it is really heartbreaking to see the progressive alienation of him from his loved one. And I don't know if it's a spoiler, but like to see him just like get written off like in such an unglorious way is really just heartbreaking, and it left me feeling kind of empty towards the end. So I respected it for evoking that emotion, but it's something that I really just would not want to revisit again.
Yeah, I agree with you, Camden. All right, so that was Sean's number 3. Now we're going to go to Camden's number 3.
All right, well, my number 3, I know Sean has higher up on his list. It's Trainspotting, so we'll probably skip me.
Okay, so that was Trainspotting is your number 3. Okay, we're gonna go to my number 3, and another one that maybe somebody already has. I don't know. It's called The Basketball Diaries. Does anybody have that?
I do not.
All right, so The Basketball Diaries is Jim Carroll, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, is consumed by his life as a high school basketball star, pressured by a wicked coach played by Bruno Kirby, and concerned mother played by Lorraine Bracco. Jim develops an appetite for heroin. Soon, the mean streets of New York City have replaced the basketball court as his main destination. Jim and his friends scrounge, steal, and prostitute themselves to score drugs. Jim's only chance to escape addiction may be reggae. Ernie Hudson, a neighborhood friend and hoops companion. I'll tell you what, this is at a period in his career where Leonardo DiCaprio was coming along. He had did What's Eating Gilbert Grape. He hadn't done Titanic yet, and you're like, okay, he's done like, I think around this time he did Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet. I don't know what the hell my problem is.
Or as I call it, Romeo plus Juliet.
Yeah, Romeo and Juliet. And this is what really started showing me that this kid could really do something different instead of being like the sidekick on a sitcom or whatever. You know, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, he was great. But then this, he really showed me that. And being around athletes like I have over the decades, I have seen basketball players turn into drug dealers, and athletes turn into drug addiction, and then their whole career are just thrown down the toilet because of drugs or alcohol or whatever. And it's sad for me because you see that potential in a young kid, and the Basketball Diaries also start. I think Mark Wahlberg's in here in a cameo role or a small role as well. It really resonated with me because I'm a coach. I've coached basketball. I've been a basketball fan my entire life growing up, and seeing somebody that wasted their whole career, what a potential career that they could have had. And I've seen it happen from a lot of different kids. And it's like, man, the potential, because I always say, man, I wish I had 1/10 of the ability that you have, and a lot of my friends are the same way. They would say, Skip, if you had the tenth of the ability that somebody else has with your drive and your will to succeed, you'd be a great basketball player. And so to see players like this use drugs and heroin to ruin their career and ruin their life, it's based on a true story, by the way. This is based on a true story. And it was just one of those movies that I just it really jumped out at me as a movie that was really effective as far as showing how painful drug addiction can be on family members, friends, and so forth. Sean, do you ever remember? Did you ever see the Basketball Diaries?
I saw it when I was a kid, like when I was very young, but I remembered nothing about it at all.
Yeah, it came out in the 90s. It came out in the 90s.
But the way you talk about it makes me want to revisit it and watch it again.
Yeah. Camden, have you seen the Basketball Diaries?
Unfortunately not. I'm sorry.
It's fine. You can't see. I mean, you guys are kind of young, so it's hard for you guys to see everything. I've been around watching movies for 40 years, so I've seen quite a bit of movies in that span of time. So, yeah. I recommend the Basketball Diaries if you haven't seen it. So that was my number 3. Now we're going to go back to Sean for his number 2.
Well, this one seems to be a popular pick. We're going to go with Trainspotting finally.
All right. Well, yeah, you go first, then Camden, then I'll go last.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite films of all time. A top 10 movie for me. It's brilliant. I think it's Danny Boyle's best film, and Danny Boyle is one of my favorite directors. And I think it's just absolutely horrifying in its depiction of heroin addiction. But I really appreciate the character work he does in it and how nuanced he is in his treatment of these characters, because he doesn't reduce them to just the average junkie. They're fully fleshed out characters. And I think it's a very powerful film that contains some of the best imagery ever committed to the screen in any genre, and definitely some of the best imagery committed in terms of drug addiction films. And I think that no conversation about films about drug addiction would be complete without the mention of this film.
Yeah, I'm going to say my bit last. Camden, what were your thoughts?
I love Trainspotting. It's one of Ewan McGregor's earlier performances, and it's probably still his best, and I don't think he'll ever top that. And that's like, he's a great actor, and the fact that he did something so amazing so early is really impressive. The one thing I like about Trainspotting is it's, again, very stylish. It's very enjoyable to watch, but at the same time, it is just absolutely horrifying. And I think it is the best anti-drug movie there is. Like, I watched that, and I'm like, yep, never touching that. No matter what, you can't pay me to touch that stuff. It is absolutely just scary. And I think, spoiler alert to those who haven't seen Trainspotting, but with the whole the baby scene, like, that's just absolutely like terrifying. And
yes,
it's a really powerful movie. And it's, again, like Sean said, you can't talk about drug addiction in film without mentioning Trainspotting at least once.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, and of course I can't, now that I want to remember the people's names, I can't remember their names. What's the guy he was on? What's the ABC show about all the Disney characters?
It's Once Upon a Time is the show.
Yeah.
Robert Carlyle is his
Robert
name.
Carlyle. Oh God, he he is amazing in this. Ewan McGregor is amazing in this, and
Ewan Brenner too is also good.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually you see these places in these films, and they see these. It's like the house that they live in is like this ramshackle house. It's like a mess, and they're like there's food wrappers and garbage everywhere, and it shows you that the life that these people live in is such a dirty life and a dirty world that they live in when you're a drug addict, and it really jumps out at you how just miserable of an existence these people have, and sometimes the craziness that drugs will make people do. And there's some crazy scenes in this film that these characters go through, and that's part of what's great about the film, and that's why I had it on my list. And you guys obviously had it higher than me. They just go through some wild experiences while doing drugs, and the camera work and the way that Danny Boyle shows you what the characters do, what their experiences with this type of stuff, that helps accentuate the drug abuse and the drug and the nature of drugs and so forth. Because sometimes, okay, you see the people, they're in a room or whatever, and they're doing drugs, but you don't really feel it as a viewer watching it. But in Trainspotting, you do, because of what he does with the camera and how he speeds things up, and it's a wild kind of a wild ride of a film. Do you guys agree with that?
Yes,
totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So that was Trainspotting, which Sean and Camden and I all had on our list, but that was Sean's number 2. So we're going to go back to Camden for his number 2.
All right. This is a movie that came out recently that I guarantee both of you have seen. 2018's A Star Is Born.
Yeah.
Now, that's a movie I saw 4 times in theaters because it's really just a fun movie. But what I really liked about it wasn't a movie about drug addiction, but drug addiction played a very huge part in Bradley Cooper's character. Like, more than anything, it was a story about music and finding your own voice, but it was layered with the whole drug addiction aspect. And I think, first off, Bradley Cooper, he acts like his butt off. It's absolutely amazing what he does with the role musically and with the darker aspects of the character. And I think the reason why this movie was so good compared to the other iterations of the film from the past is that this one really works overtime in developing the male lead and making it a co-lead with the female lead. And yeah, it's a very heartbreaking movie. It shows, the effects of, fame on addiction and how it can affect yourself, your career, and the people you love and are trying to help. And I don't think there's anything I can say about it that hasn't already been said, but again, I think Bradley Cooper did a great job with this movie, directing, writing, and acting in it. And more than anything, it's a really heartbreaking story of addiction and love.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. He wasn't even supposed to be the original director of it, and it was going to be him and somebody else. Beyonce was going to star in it with him. Instead, he ended up directing it, and it became Lady Gaga. So it had an interesting role to get this movie, the third iteration of this movie, made. And like you said, I mean, Bradley Cooper is fantastic in this film, and so is Lady Gaga. And it really shows you it. Whereas the Basketball Diaries had a kid who had a lot of potential in basketball, he could have been a star. This guy was a singer. He was a successful singer, and he threw it down the toilet because of his addictions and so forth. Even though he had people there, his brother and the Lady Gaga, that really loved him. And it just shows you what people do, what drugs do to people. And it didn't matter if you're a basketball player or a successful musician or what. It ruins your life. Sean, do you got any thoughts about this film?
Yeah, I think both of you have covered it all. It's a really great film. I agree. I think it is the best of the 3 versions or 4 versions. Are there 3 or 4?
Yeah, I thought there was
It's the best versions, regardless. And I think I agree. Bradley Cooper is great performance.
Yeah. I mean, he is amazing. I remember the Chris Christopherson one, and then there was the
there was the Audrey Hepburn one, and then there was one that was earlier than that. So there were. This is the fourth one, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I could remember. I thought there was only 3. All right, that's fine. There's no problem with that. So that was Camden's number 2. So we're gonna go to my number 2 now. And like always, if somebody has it, just say. My number 2 is from director Steven Soderbergh, and it came out. It was his. He actually won a Best Director Oscar for this film, and it shows variation of what drugs do in the country and how drugs are brought into the country and how drugs affect people by taking drugs and so forth. In this case, it's a I don't know if he was a congressman or a senator. Michael Douglas plays like some kind of a political figure, and
he was a judge.
A judge. Okay, he was a judge. Does anybody have Traffic by any chance?
No.
Okay. And his daughter gets involved with this character played by Topher Grace, and the daughter. Oh God, I can't think of the daughter's name right now. She's been in a few things, but this is probably one of the most prominent things she was in. The girl that plays the daughter. But if one of you guys could look that up while I'm talking, I appreciate it. I mean, if you don't mind. So the daughter gets involved with this kid played by Topher Grace at a private school. They go to school together and they get into doing heroin at school. And one thing leads to another. They go off to this place in the middle of a bad part of town or wherever, and they end up getting high in this room. And what happens is the Topher Grace character leaves the other character, and she gets involved with pimps, and she starts prostituting herself and all this stuff. It's a pretty ugly scene, pretty ugly. And then Michael Douglas is going to drive around looking for her in this bad part of town and stuff. It really shows you when you start taking these drugs and you start taking heroin and you start getting in with the wrong crowd, how fast it could spiral downward. And for her, it spiraled downward very quickly. Maybe that was in the context of the film, because this film had multiple storylines going on. It was one of these films that had 2 or 3 different kinds of storylines that all intersected. And it was very effective in all the different storylines by Steven Soderbergh. Did anybody look that up, what her name was by any chance?
Yeah, Erica Christensen.
Yeah, Erica Christensen. She is fantastic in this role. One of the few things I've seen her in. I think she's been in like a sitcom, some TV stuff, but I really haven't seen her in a lot of movies. But wow, was she fantastic in this? Topher Grace, what a just snake in the grass of just a nasty guy. But this is what happens. Girls will get involved with these guys, and these guys disappear, and then the girl's stuck with these pimps and in this crazy world. And I just felt so bad for the father and the parents involved, because you're helpless, and this guy's trying to fight a war on crime from a political aspect, and yet his daughter's here getting involved with heroin and so forth. Does anybody recollect this film and have any thoughts? Sean?
It's another one that I haven't seen since I'm a kid, but I am a huge Soderbergh fan. I wouldn't call it one of my favorite Soderberghs, even though it's generally considered to be one of his best. But it is one that I've been meaning to revisit, because I do love Soderbergh so much, and I need to revisit some of his more acclaimed films.
Yeah. Camden, do you remember seeing Traffic?
I actually started watching that this morning to prepare for this, but I got halfway through because I had to take care of some stuff for class because I have a midterm soon. So I have like an hour or two left, like an hour and a half left probably. So I'm going to finish that tonight probably.
Did you get to the points of what I was talking about yet?
Yeah, pretty much. And so far I like how Soderbergh like really seamlessly cuts between all his different storylines, but also I like how it doesn't just pick one aspect of drug use. Like he has the addiction storyline, he has the law enforcement storyline with Benicio del Toro, and a separate one with Don Cheadle. But also I like the Michael Douglas storyline because that also tackles the politics of the war on drugs, because he's a judge and he's meeting with all these senators and other political figures talking about how this is just an unwinnable war, and lots of different political aspects that are explored. And again, I like how Soderbergh seamlessly just blends it all together.
Yeah, that's what's one of the great parts about the film. All right, so that was my number 2. So now, before we go on to our number 1s, we're going to go into some honorable mentions. Sean, you said you don't have any honorable mentions. Have you thought?
I have a few that I ended up cutting. I was trying to come up with a list, and there were some that I was thinking of including, but the drug part of the storyline is the drug addiction part of the storyline is only partial on it, and those are Good Time is one, the Safety Brothers movie. It's a very good film. There's the storyline involving the acid and the character who's an addict on that, and I feel like that was, even though it's not the main portion of the film, is a really intense depiction of drug addiction, and so I think that's a really strong film. And then the other one is one that I know you love, Dan, that I turned you on to, and it is the documentary Some Kind of Heaven, that I think is a really brilliant documentary. And there's a version of the film about a character who gets hooked on hallucinogenic drugs, and it's really heartbreaking to watch. It's a film with a lot of funny elements, but it's that particular one felt like the most resonant element of any of them in the film.
Yeah, that was this is a documentary, and this is a guy that lives in a senior citizen community, and he's all messed up, and he's ruined his relationship with his wife, and then he gets into arguments with the judge and all this stuff. It's like, wow, like you don't see this coming in this documentary. He really picked some interesting characters. Oppenheim, Lance Oppenheim, the director. All right, so Camden, what do you got?
It's a little Netflix movie from a few years ago called Six Balloons with Abby Jacobson from Broad City and Dave Franco, who from his movies. But I think it's interesting because it's one of the few times we get to see Dave Franco take a purely dramatic role, and he plays a heroin addicted guy, and his sister Abby Jacobson has to spend the entire day driving around with him and his daughter trying to find a detox center. And it's a very short 75-minute movie, but it really gives Dave Franco the chance to show off his abilities as a dramatic actor. It's really ugly, really nasty, really gross because of, the nastiness of withdrawals. And there are scenes where she's going to different pharmacies looking for syringes to give him a brief fix while they're looking for a detox. And again, it's really anxiety-inducing. It's really gross. And it's a nice little movie on Netflix that it's kind of under the radar, but it's worth checking out.
Yeah, I've not seen it. I actually not heard of it before.
Me neither. So I'll have to say that again, Camden.
Six Balloons.
Six Balloons. I have to definitely check that out. Yeah, I have 5. I have 5 honorable mentions. Like I said to these guys beforehand, it's not a film that focuses on the drug addiction aspect of it, but it's a main part of one particular character, and that is Ray Liotta's Henry Hill. Henry Hill believes he's being chased by helicopters, and he's got this scene near the end of the movie where he's running around. He's got to sell these guns. He's got to stir this. He's got to stir the sauce. He's got to take this one to the airport. He's doing all this stuff while he's high on cocaine, and the frantic nature of this scene at the end of the movie, near the end of the movie, really shows you the cost of the things that he started doing while he was working as a member of his gang. And he instead of selling the drugs, he started taking the drugs, and he had different characters chopping it up and putting it in different bags and all this stuff. There's just an aspect of drug addiction in Goodfellas. It's not the whole movie, but I thought that scene, that particular scene with Henry Hill, where he's going around crazy and messed up in the head because of drugs was very, very effective. Another one that had one character that I thought was one of the better a very good depiction of drug abuse is in a film called What We Lost in the Fire, where there's a character played by Benicio del Toro. He's the friend of somebody who ends up dying, but his wife reaches out to him and she finds him and she tries to help him, but a drug addict will keep going back to that world over and over. And I thought Benicio del Toro really showed how awful the world of drug addiction is, and how far spiraled down your life can become. He's like living in a homeless shelter and stuff like this, and he's having a kind of a rough go of it.
I agree. That one's a really great film.
Another one that has just one character, but she's very, very, very effective in my opinion. Watching the film, in a beautiful, beautiful film, she's such an ugly character, and that's Moonlight, where you have the Naomi Harris character, where she's the mother of the little guy, one of the 3 incarnations of the main character, and she's just messed up. Messed up beyond. I never seen Naomi Harris do something like this in her career, and when I finally saw it, she was getting all kinds of awards buzz for her character in this film. She plays a mother. This is the mother of a little kid, and she's over there getting high and getting drunk, and then it's just craziness that what she does in Moonlight. And another one, it's okay. This is kind of like this guy's life has kind of gotten glamorized a little bit, the life of Hunter S. Thompson, but the one that really is way out there, wild and crazy, was Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
I almost put that on my list, but I didn't. I haven't seen it to really talk about it.
Johnny Depp and what a wild, crazy ride these guys are on. The psychedelics that they're going through and so forth in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And another one that I thought was good, it was an intersection, one of these movies where 3 characters intersect and their lives are irrevocably changed, but they kind of, it has like a drug element to it, and that's 21 Grams by Alejandro Inarritu, and it's got Sean Penn, Naomi Harris, and once again Benicio del Toro, that are all fantastic in that. So those are my honorable mentions, but let's get into talking about our number ones. So Sean, take it away.
Yeah, so my number one, actually a film that I think might be my favorite of all time. I don't call anything like into my favorites until I've seen it more than once, and I've only seen this once, but it's a really amazing film, and that is Bob Fosse's All That Jazz. Have either of you seen it?
Yeah, I own the Criterion. Yep.
Yeah, I do as well. I think it's a brilliant film. And it's obviously semi-autobiographical about Fosse's own life. It's based on his time where he was choreographing the musical Chicago and making the film Lenny. And it kind of shows how his own struggles with addiction kind of drew him down. And then, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it, but he predicts his own death basically in the same way that he would actually die, which is uncanny and sad as well, because you would think he's got this movie that's about the danger of drug addiction and he still fell victim to it. And I think that really shows the perpetual cycle of addiction and how it continues to hurt people even when they recognize that it's an issue.
Yeah, All That Jazz. Just, I love that movie, but to me, what I love the miniseries on FX about Bob Fosse's life better. I thought it went into his life better. So that's
I haven't watched Fosse Verdon, but I think the difference is that is actually a biography, and All That Jazz is like almost autobiographical, but it's not quite. Like, it's a fictional story that's just loosely inspired by his life. And I think that it's really, really powerful. And I don't think there's any film that has made me feel like that film made me feel.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. A lot of times people try to work themselves to death, and sometimes they take these drugs, and these drugs are a way to accentuate, like allow them to keep working and doing what they do. In this case, he's a filmmaker and he's dealing with making this movie and so forth. And sometimes it takes you away from getting sleep and different variations of your life. And there's a reason why you're supposed to sleep. Your body's supposed to heal. Your body's supposed to grow hair, grow fingernails. You're supposed to your body's supposed to recuperate. You're meant to recuperate. And by taking these drugs and you're preventing yourself from sleeping and doing things like that, it's not good for your body. And that's some of the things that he goes through and all that jazz, I believe. Camden, do you remember, do you have any recollections of all that jazz?
Yeah, it's one of those movies that I enjoyed but didn't love, but I also have just a lot of respect for the reasons Sean named. And I appreciate how it was almost an indictment of himself, and it was a very honest way of him exploring his own problems with addiction. And again, it's one of those things that I really have respect for because of how daring it was to take on something so like autobiographical for him. And like Sean said, the fact that he nearly predicted his death is very, very uncanny.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was definitely crazy. All right, Camden, it's time. It's your time.
All right.
I think I already know what your number one is, but
yeah. My number one's Darren Aronofsky's Requiem for a Dream. So this is a movie that I'm sure almost every single person has seen at this point. And it's a movie that works in scaring you straight, not because of necessarily its realism, but because of how surreal it is, especially when it comes to scenes with Ellen Burstyn, with her fridge and the talk show and all that. It's a very immersive movie that is frantic and all over the place. And it has a great ensemble with, Ellen Burstyn, Jennifer Connelly, Jared Leto, and Marlon Wayans, who all do great. And I think, like most Darren Aronofsky movies, the reason why it stands the test of time is its final act, where all hell just kind of breaks loose and you're in these really fast paced scenes, intercutting chaos. So you have, Jared Leto, spoiler, getting his arm amputated. You have Ellen Burstyn just losing her mind. Jennifer Connelly at that drunken orgy party. And it's a very good movie, but also a very harrowing movie, and one that kind of does warn against the, dangers of addiction and just how it can harm you irreparably.
Yeah, no, I had this on my list. I think I had it at number 4. It's just a wild, wild, wild film. And part of the reason, we've touched on it a little bit, like with Trainspotting and some of these, in my honorable mentions, Moonlight. I meant Goodfellas. Drugs can really mess up your life. And so for a director like Aronofsky that shows like the frantic nature of what drugs can do to you and addiction can do to you. And he uses these 3 different storylines to show the difference in how it affects people differently. And like you said, great performances by everybody involved. And one of his best films. I mean, I'm not the biggest Darren Aronofsky fan. There's a few of his movies that I like, but some of them are kind of like out there, and they're kind of a little bit wild in nature. But this is one that it's wild, but it has a very good point to it, and it shows you how frantic and how crazy becoming an addict and doing drugs and so forth can get in your life, and the effects it has on you. And it's not just one character, it's multiple characters in different ways. And that's what's very effective by Requiem for a Dream. So that's why I had it on my list. Sean, you got any thoughts on Requiem for a Dream?
Yeah, I'm in the minority here, but I cannot stand this film. I don't like Darren Aronofsky very much, which is kind of ironic because I just Some Kind of Heaven, the honorable mention film, is actually executive produced by him. But I don't like Darren Aronofsky that much. I didn't care for this film. It's been multiple years since I've seen it, but I was not a fan whatsoever. It didn't for me.
Yeah, sorry for coughing there. Yeah, it came out 20-something years ago. It's almost like a 25-year-old film. So it just came out again recently on 4K, and the 4K. If you haven't seen this on 4K, it really just accentuates all the craziness and all the wild and stuff that's going on in the film. So I recommend seeing it in 4K if you haven't seen it out there. Anybody that might be watching this in the future. But yeah, Requiem for a Dream is a great film. It's one of Aronofsky's best, and that's why I had it on my list, Camden. So once again, great pick. My number one pick is a film that it's the only one of its kind. It came out in 1968 and won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1969. And I'm going to read a little blurb about this film, just because I think I could talk about it, but I want to read this. Convinced of his irresistible appeal to women, Texas dishwasher Joe Buck, John Voight, quits his job and heads for New York City, thinking he'll latch on to some rich dowager. New York, however, is not as hospitable as he imagined, and Joe soon finds himself living in an abandoned building with a Dickinson-y layabout named Enrico Razzo Rizzo, played by Dustin Hoffman. The two form a rough alliance, and together they kickstart Joe's hustling career just as Rizzo's health begins to disintegrate. All right, so I just want to read that. If that doesn't entice you to say, okay, what film is this? That sounds incredible. It's called Midnight Cowboy, and it stars John Voight and Dustin Hoffman. And the character of Enrico Razzo Rizzo, the name Razzo, Dustin Hoffman studied rats and mice to really get the feel of this slimy, dirty, just nasty character. And these guys are living in an abandoned building. They're doing drugs. Joe Buck has to resort to prostituting himself out because he has no money. And it's just such a dirty, just gritty, nasty world that these characters live in. And at the time, New York was a dirty, nasty, gritty place. Like Scorsese has pictured it in like Taxi Driver. And films, some of the films of the 70s have really showed you the nasty nature of New York. But this really got down, gets between your fingernails how nasty and dirty in this world and the drug addict nature of it, what these guys will do to get a high. And Rizzo is he starts to die. He gets sick and he starts to die in the film. It was the X-rated film, and it won the Academy Award. It's the only time this has ever happened because the intravenous drug use is so realistic. It is probably the best portrayal. I mean, obviously, it's all in the eye of the beholder. It's probably one of the best portrayals, or if not the best, of drug addiction in a movie, in my opinion, because it just shows the nature how nasty this can be. This whole thing can be of drug addiction and intravenous drug use and so forth, and how bad. Joe Buck was a dishwasher in Texas, and he was doing okay, but he thought he had this good looks, and this and that and the other, and he was going to go to New York, and he was going to. But look what it does to him. Does hit, and then of course Razzo Rizzo. That you already see the effects of these types of things on him. He's such a miserable looking character as it is. Of course, this film is famous for the line, I'm walking here," which is a completely ad-libbed line. It wasn't even in the script, but it's one of the most famous lines in movie history. Sean, have you seen Midnight Cowboy? You got any thoughts?
Yeah, it's been another one that it's been quite a few years. I remember being very moved by the film. I think John Voight's performance is probably one of the greatest performances of all time, period. I think he's a great actor that in recent years has not been getting the roles that he deserves. But in his earlier career, he was just phenomenal, and I think this is his best film.
Yeah, definitely agree. Camden, have you seen Midnight Cowboy? Do you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I saw it about a year ago. I was not too impressed with the whole thing, unfortunately. I love Dustin Hoffman, and I thought he was a fantastic character. I thought he did really well, but the movie as a whole just didn't really speak to me, and it's kind of dragged a little too much for me.
Yeah, it's fine. It's no problem. I mean, that's why film is subjective. Everybody has an opinion about it, and that's what's great about film. We all have different opinions. All right, so that is the end of our list. Sean, run down from your 5 to 1.
Yeah, so my number 5 is Tell Your Children, aka Reefer Madness. My number 4 is The Beach Bum. My number 3 is The Souvenir. Number 2 is Trainspotting, and number 1 is All That Jazz.
And Camden.
All right, my number 5 was Her Smell. Number 4 was Rachel Getting Married. Number 3 was Trainspotting. Number 2 was 2018's A Star Is Born, and number 1 was Requiem for a Dream.
And my number 5 is Trainspotting. My number 4 is Requiem for a Dream. My 3 is The Basketball Diaries. My number 2 is Traffic, and my number 1 is Midnight Cowboy. I just want to say, I think we all got a bunch of films in here, and what I like, and one of the reasons why I love doing the show is we get to talk about all these different kinds of films. And in this particular topic, we really did run the gambit of very films from all decades, going back to the 60s.
Almost the 30s.
Say that again?
Almost back to the 30s.
Yeah, almost back to the 30s. Oh, that's right. Forgot about that. I forgot all about that, Sean. But yeah, so we go back many decades on the different variations, and it shows that a lot of great filmmakers have tackled this topic, and there have been a lot of great films with characters and subject matter about this, and it shows that this is a topic that it's going to continuously be made into movies because it's a topic that affects society as a whole in a lot of different ways, and that's why Cherry, the movie that Cherry came out this week wide, and it's going to go on Apple Plus, and that's the reason why we're doing this topic, because of the characters in the film Cherry. So just so people why are we doing this topic? It's Cherry. So Sean, where can you be found?
Yeah, so you can read all of our stuff at disappointmentmedia.com, and then on social media, I am at Big Tuna on Film on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd.
That's right. Camden, where can you be found?
I can also be found on Disappointment Media, and for most of my movie-related stuff, you can find me on Facebook. My name, Camden Farrell, and on Letterboxd at Camden Farrell.
I could vouch for these guys. I also work for Disappointment Media, and this is what's so great about this episode. We got the band together for the first time ever on one of my shows, and so I was very excited to get these guys together for an episode of Top 5 Weekly. I work for Disappointment Media as well as a contributing writer. You can find all my reviews. I do retrospectives. I do new movies that are out in theaters. I do TV shows, so forth and whatnot. Also, I have my own blog, From the Fourth Row, at WordPress.com, where if I don't write it for disappointmentmedia.com, I'm writing it on my blog more than likely. So those are the two places you can find me as far as a writer goes. And obviously, Top 5 Weekly is on YouTube under Dan Allen. And I do another show called Bleacher Features, which is about myself and a guest. We talk about a sports movie, and that's a summer series. I did 2 summers of that. Now we're going to be coming up on a 3rd summer of that. So Stay tuned for that coming up pretty soon. And obviously, if you want to look for me on the social, Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. So for Sean and Camden, good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.